Hello again, world. Still September 2nd, 2009. I have a story to tell, and this story is one that dates back to when I was 4 or 5 years old, and it stayed with me. It has been with me my whole life. I have told this story, or part of it, many, many times over the years. Perhaps the beginning of this story is what was my inspiration for going into the Air Force. I will never know that, but I like to think so. 3 or 4 doors up from my house there on Lakato Avenue lived a family, the O'Briens. I call Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien. And I grew up going to their house, sitting and talking with them in their parlor, as I often did. They have a son, Warren. My only recollection of Warren was standing in front of their house, perhaps the day he left for the military. He had already been in the military many years, I would later find out. And he was in uniform in front of the house, and just vague, these vague things that a 4 or 5 year old would say. Well, I never saw Warren again. I was raised around his daughter. Later was find out he had another daughter. But grew up going to the O'Briens and always hearing the same story. My son Warren was a United States Air Force pilot, and he was shot down in Korea. And his wingman saw him go to the ground and waved, but he was never seen again. So Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien, I know, went to their graves, still believing their son Warren was alive. And I did. I always thought, where is Warren? What happened to him? He was on the ground. He was safe. What did the North Koreans do to him? Or later on, what did the Chinese do to him? Or what did the Russians do to him? I never knew. But I've told this story my whole life to anybody interested in military historians and people we've been able to keep in our heart that we never even knew. And my heart has always gone out to the O'Briens, even in the hereafter. So we have to flash forward to 2000 now, and the internet. And as I've often done, either through any of the search engines, I put different things, different names in, I'm always looking for something. Something comes into my head, a classmate, a teacher, a relative, distant relative's genealogy. And one day I put in Warren G. O'Brien, and I got a hit. The Korean War Project, which is still out there, had Warren's name and military information in there. I believe it said killed while missing. Killed while missing? What was more to this story? I didn't have much more to go on than that. My first thoughts, though, has the family seen this? What's the rest of the story here? How do I convey that to them? Well, here's where my great background of research comes into play. Okay, because of Mr. Cliff Cowan, I was a member of the American Legion Post in Audubon, New Jersey. And I know from the getting mailings from them, there was a Leonard Cates on there. Well, Leonard Cates was my next door neighbor's son. So I thought, okay, he's the oldest person I know there I could call up and say something to, and maybe he might remember me. So I calls Leonard up. I says, we had a family in Audubon, O'Brien's, up the street. Do you know of any relatives still surviving there in the area? He didn't, but he knew of a friend of the O'Briens. So I gave him the phone number, Haddon Heights. The friend of the O'Briens gave me Warren's sister-in-law's name, who was, I believe, in Collinsville. So I call her, I get an answering service, I leave a message. 2 weeks later, I get a call from this lady's son saying, who are you and why are you interested in my uncle? So we talk, tell him the story, gives me the phone numbers of Warren's 2 daughters. out in both in California, one in San Francisco, one in LA. The oldest one we used to play with is a lawyer, Bonnie, and the other one's whose name I can't remember now, or it's in my internet there, lived near San Francisco. So I talked to Bonnie for a couple minutes. That's the last I've ever heard from her, and I then corresponded for a while with the daughter. It seems that only about a year or so before that, they had gotten involved in the search for MIAs. They never knew what happened to their father. But 2 years before that, they finally were called aside by the government officials and says, "We found out what happened to your father." And they says, because of the end of the Cold War, Russian records have been uncovered. And one of them was a Russian pilot who, in fact, shot down your father. He never bailed out. He was killed instantly. In the records, and the reason this came about was that Russian pilots were paid a $50 bounty if they could prove they shot down an American pilot. Well, Warren was on a bombing mission to bomb a bridge, and on the way back, obviously, he was not a match for a fighter. He was in an F-84, I believe, and he was jumped from behind and shot down. On the ground, the North Koreans then were sent to the wreckage to find out if it was an American pilot or not. And they uncovered, they found pieces of the plane and pieces of the body. All that was mentioned in the records that was recovered was a name tag, a patch, his .38 revolver, and his foot in a boot. That was all that was recovered of Captain Warren Obrien, the United States Air Force, in September 1951. But the family never knew that. Through my research, though, I found that same pattern in other military records of other pilots that were shot down, bailed out, went to the ground, was seen alive. But I am thinking that the government used that as a guise. Since bodies weren't recovered, they were declared MIA, and from then on the pilots' families would continue to get their salaries, etc. And his wife never did remarry, so I assume she got his pay and all that her whole life. And that's basically the story. From MIA to proven killed in battle. Warren's name is not anywhere in an Audubon monument. I've contacted the school, I've contacted the VFW, I've contacted the American Legion, to no avail. His name still is nowhere. And he is one of our American heroes. He graduated from Audubon High School in 1940. My mother would reflect that everybody loved him. He had a great smile. He had Clark Gable looks. His nickname, I believe, was Opie. So his name exists at Punch Bowl in Hawaii on the monuments for the MIAs of Korea. But as far as I know, his name does not exist anywhere else in this world. This story hopefully will last many years, and many of you will pass it on to other people at Veterans Day, at Memorial Day, as an honor to one of our unsung heroes who gave all in the Korean War. I'm out of time on this now. This is Gus and Warren saying have a good day, and when you see a veteran, thank him for his service. Bye now, and have a good day.